Marshal Amer told me, draw up a plan of retreat. Bring the troops back across the canal.
Marshal Amer had been a close friend of President Nasser for more than 20 years. They had fought together as young officers. Together they had planned the coup which brought down the Egyptian monarchy. Now the defeated president phoned his defeated army commander.
I was the only other person there. Amer was in tears. He was calling Nasser by his first name. He said, "Let me bring our boys back safely, Gamal." When he put the phone down, I asked, "Why are you crying?" He told me Nasser had said, "Forgive me, Hakim. I caused this catastrophe. Forgive me, Hakim." Abdul Nasser had been crying too.
Marshal Amer didn't wait for his chief of staff to plan a retreat. He simply picked up the phone and gave the order himself.
The order was, withdraw back across the canal. Leave the artillery behind.
Marshal Amer's order was a disaster. With no plan, his retreating units could not protect each other. The Israelis gave chase.
Our tanks had Egyptian tanks in front and behind them. We attacked them from the ground and from the air. Thousands were destroyed. They were all burning. It was a terrible sight.
338 Israelis were killed. But the Egyptian dead numbered 15,000. Days earlier, when the war had begun, the Israelis had contacted the King of Jordan.
We did not plan to take Jerusalem or the West Bank. We did not plan to take the Golan. On the 5th, we sent a telegram through the Americans to King Hussein, telling him that the war was between us and the Egyptians. If Jordan stayed out, nothing would happen. But at about 10:30, he started shelling Jerusalem.
In the command post, we looked at each other. We said, "This is not nice. We'll take on Hussein." The deputy chief of staff called me. He said, "Uzi, you are authorized to enter the old city. You have to be quick and use your head."
It took the Israelis 10 hours of bitter street fighting to defeat the Jordan Legion soldiers defending the old city. Once the troops had broken through to the Wailing Wall, keeping the city united under Israel's rule became the basic goal of the government. When the battle ended, Jordan had lost not only the old city, but all the land on the west bank of the Jordan River.
I went out to the front and I could see people crossing over in small groups, very tired. You know, all the years that I spent since 1953 trying to build that country and build that army, all the pride, all the hopes, I saw it just destroyed. I never received a more crushing blow than that.
With Jordan and Egypt defeated, Israel turned its might on the Golan Heights, the site of frequent attacks from Syria.
Dayan said, "We're going to take the Golan now." I remember that some ministers from the religious parties were opposed to this. Dayan was adamant. He said, "We're not going to lose time. I've delayed it this long because we wanted to finish with the Egyptians and Jordanians."
We threw everything we had at the Golan Heights. In 12 hours, we dropped more bombs on the Golan than we had on all the Egyptian airfields. Rockets, bombs, napalm, everything we had.
The whole war had been sparked by a false Soviet report of a threat to Syria. Now that Israel was actually attacking Syria, the Soviets were forced to react.
Word came through the hotline was up, and I didn't know what it was about because I thought that the war was pretty well over. Nevertheless, I went back immediately to the White House. The usual suspects were there, McNamara and the rest. And we had a rather hairy message from the Russians.
The Soviets made very clear they would intervene militarily. And very likely they would not only turn Israel back from its attack on Syria, but they would join Syria in an effort to deal a mortal blow to Israel. It was a very, very dangerous situation.
The Soviets did not seem to be bluffing. Strategic Bomber Command in the Ukraine had received orders to prepare 4 squadrons to fly to the battle zone.
It was all arranged in a great hurry. We were given strict instructions not to suffer any casualties. The loss of even one Soviet aircraft would betray our involvement. But we saw this was unrealistic, so we had to find another way.
The pilots were then ordered to leave behind all identification. Their planes were to be repainted in Egyptian colors.
Our red stars are only one color, red. But it turned out that now we needed 4 different colors. I remember green and black and something else, maybe red. But we didn't have the right colors. So that caused a lot of fuss.
In the White House Situation Room, President Johnson and his staff worked out their response to the Soviet ultimatum. The president sent a message over the hotline telling the Kremlin that he was using every means to get the Israelis to stop the war. This was not strictly true. Although he could have phoned the Israeli Prime Minister directly, he phoned the Israeli ambassador to the UN instead.
United States Ambassador Goldberg asked me to come out into the lobby and to say to me, you must immediately announce that the fighting is over.
This was not within the Israeli ambassador's power, so he asked his boss, Abba Eban, to phone the Prime Minister. But Eshkol was with his generals on the Golan Heights.
Suddenly Abba Eban calls and says, "Tell Eshkol to stop the war. We're under terrible pressure here at the United Nations." Then Eshkol calls me and he says, "This Golan is absolutely fantastic. The view is wonderful." He waxes lyrical about it. And I tell him, "Eshkol, listen, Eban wants you to stop the war. He can't take the pressure." He said, "I can't hear you." "What do you mean you can't hear me? I'm telling you in Eban's exact words." He says, "I can't hear you, I can't hear you. It's a bad line, it's a bad line. I'll come home and then we'll talk." And then I understood. They wanted time to conquer some more kilometers.